What if the arteries of America's clean energy revolution, electric vehicles, smart grids, semiconductors, were suddenly choked by a single metal, copper? What if Canada, the U.S. most reliable supplier, faced a crippling 50% tariff, threatening billions in trade and the green future both nations chase? Welcome to War and Global Trade, where we don't just track cash flows, we dissect the raw power driving them. Today we plunge into a high-stakes crisis that could fracture the US-Canada Energy and Security Alliance. This isn't just about copper, it's about who controls the lifeblood of tomorrow's green tech. Buckle up, the stakes are electric. The US and Canada aren't just neighbors, they're locked in a strategic embrace forged by geography, security, and cold industrial calculus. Canada's copper mines, from British Columbia's rugged highlands to Ontario's alloy-rich veins, aren't just holes in the ground. They're the backbone of America's industrial engine. Copper flows south via rail and road to Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois, feeding factories churning out EV batteries, defense systems, and renewable energy grids. In a world of fractured supply chains, Red Sea conflicts, Panama Canal bottlenecks, Canada's proximity isn't just convenient, it's a geopolitical trump card. Transcontinental shipping routes are crumbling under piracy and drought. Canada's mines, a stone's throw from US factories, are a lifeline. Canada's resource wealth isn't raw luck, it's geological destiny. British Columbia's Highland Valley and Gibraltar mines pump out copper and gold. Ontario and Newfoundland Labrador churn copper-nickel alloys critical for high-tech industries. Companies like Teck Resources, Hudbay Minerals, and Glencore Canada don't just dig, they refine, process, and export high-value products, copper wire, cathodes, alloys, that power America's green ambitions. In 2024, Canada shipped $4 billion in copper to the US, up from $3.4 billion in 2023 per Natural Resources Canada. Half of that? Refined products, not raw ore. This isn't just trade, it's a tightly woven supply chain, hardened by decades of strategic alignment. Copper isn't just a commodity, it's a weapon of history. During the Cold War, Canadian copper fueled US defense, radar systems, missiles, circuits, while the Soviet threat loomed. Relying on volatile suppliers in Asia or South America was a non-starter. Canada, a democratic ally, was the safe bet. That logic still holds. The USMCA, successor to NAFTA, keeps tariffs near zero, letting copper flow freely. From 1994 to 2024, this framework turned Canada into the U.S. copper artery, delivering $2 billion in copper wire alone last year. Teck, Hudbay, and Glencore don't just meet demand, they set the standard, with ESG-compliant operations that outshine competitors in Chile or China. But the game's changing. Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act have supercharged U.S. copper demand. EVs guzzle 3 to 4 times more copper than gas cars, motors, cables, chargers, batteries. The International Energy Agency projects North American copper needs will hit 1 million tons annually by 2035, up from a few hundred thousand today. Renewable grids, offshore wind, solar, require miles of copper to link scattered sources to cities. Semiconductors, reborn under the CHIPS Act, lean on ultra-pure copper for circuits and chips. Canada's mines and refineries are perfectly positioned to feed this hunger, cutting U.S. reliance on China's murky supply chains or Chile's drought-hit mines. Then, a detonation. On August 1, 2025, the U.S. slaps a 50% tariff on all copper imports, including Canada's. This isn't a trade tweak, it's a sledgehammer. Under Trump's Buy American, Build American mantra, protectionism is back, targeting even allies. Canadian copper, cathodes, wires, rods, suddenly faces a price wall, threatening its edge in the U.S. market. American manufacturers, from EV plants to grid builders, face a cost spike that could ripple into consumer prices. For Canada, the math is brutal. $4 billion in exports, thousands of jobs, and a decades-old trade flow are at risk. The USMCA, meant to keep trade frictionless, is now a battleground. Canada's pushing for exemptions, citing national security and supply chain stability. But Trump's team isn't budging, prioritizing domestic mines over foreign allies. This isn't just a tariff, it's a signal. The US is redrawing its industrial map and Canada's caught in the crossfire. Negotiations under USMCA's dispute clauses are a long shot. Canada's response? Don't beg, pivot. Ottawa's eyeing new markets, the EU, Asia, Latin America. The EU's CETA agreement opens doors to green-focused nations hungry for clean copper. Japan and South Korea, tech giants, need reliable suppliers. Brazil and Mexico offer processing partnerships. Canada's not just reacting, it's rewriting its role as a global copper power, leveraging hydro-powered refineries and transparent supply chains to outmaneuver competitors. Canada's edge isn't just volume, it's values. Unlike Chile's coal-driven mines or China's opaque operations, Canada's copper is clean. British Columbia and Quebec's hydroelectric systems slash emissions, making Canadian copper a darling of ESG-conscious buyers. Teck Resources' Trail Smelter, a $1 billion investment, isn't just boosting output, it's cutting emissions, recycling water, and setting a global standard. As the US and EU chase net zero, Canada's low-carbon copper is a strategic asset. Add strict regulations and traceable supply chains, and Canada stands out against African or Chinese producers dogged by labor and environmental scandals. In a world decoupling from China, Canada's G7, NATO, and USMCA credentials make it a partner, not just a supplier. This crisis isn't just a threat, it's a crucible. Canada's copper strategy, honed over decades, is shifting from raw exports to refined, high-value products. Copper cathodes, 99.9% pure, and wires for EVs and grids are Canada's future. The US tariff stings, but it's forcing a reckoning. Canada's not doubling down on a single market, it's going global, building resilience against protectionist shocks. The numbers tell the story, from $3.4 billion in 2023 to $4 billion in 2024. With refined products driving growth, this isn't retreat, it's reinvention. The U.S. quote. As 50% tariff on Canadian copper isn't just a trade jab, it's a seismic shift, threatening to fracture a partnership that powers America's green revolution. Canada, the US. This copper lifeline faces a choice: bend under protectionism or forge a new path as a global mineral titan. This is war and global trade, where we cut through the noise to expose the raw mechanics of power. The battle for copper is a battle for the future, electric connected and fiercely contested. Let's dive into the fallout and Canada's next move. The August 1st, 2025 tariff isn't a policy footnote, it's a wrecking ball. Canadian copper, from cathodes to wires, fuels US factories building EVs, transformers, and smart grids. A 50% tax makes these inputs pricier, squeezing American manufacturers already grappling with tight margins. Consumers could feel the pinch: higher EV prices, costlier renewables, delayed grid upgrades. For Canada, the stakes are existential. $4 billion in 2024 exports per Natural Resources Canada, and thousands of jobs in British Columbia, Ontario, and Newfoundland Labrador hang in the balance. Teck Resources, Hudbay Minerals, and Glencore Canada, pillars of the industry, face a market where their competitive edge is blunted overnight. The USMCA, designed to keep North American trade fluid, is Canada's first line of defense. Ottawa's pushing for exemptions, arguing copper's role in US national security, EVs, defense systems, semiconductors, demands special treatment. But Trump's administration, doubling down on Buy American, sees allies as collateral damage. Dispute resolution clauses in USMCA offer a lifeline, but negotiations are a gauntlet. The US wants domestic mines to fill the gap, even if they can't match Canada's scale or ESG standards. Canada's not waiting for a handshake, it's already pivoting, eyes locked on new horizons. Canada's response isn't desperation, it's calculation. The US market, once a golden goose, is now a liability. Ottawa's diversification strategy, seeded during 2018's steel tariff fights, is in overdrive. 3 regions beckon: the EU, Asia, and Latin America. The EU's Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, slashes barriers, opening doors to Germany, France, and Scandinavia, where green tech demands clean copper. Japan and South Korea, hungry for high-purity copper for chips and EVs, see Canada as a stable alternative to Chile's drought-crippled mines. In Latin America, Brazil and Mexico offer partnerships for processing and intermediate exports, leveraging Canada's refining expertise. This isn't a retreat, it's a power play. Canada's exports have already shifted. In 2024, $2 billion of the $4 billion in US-bound copper was high-value products like wire and cathodes, per the World Economic Data Alliance. By targeting new markets, Canada sidesteps US protectionism while capitalizing on global electrification. South Korea's EV boom and Europe's net zero push need copper, clean, traceable, and reliable. Canada's hydro-powered refineries and strict regulations give it a leg up over competitors like Peru or Congo, where environmental and labor issues taint supply chains. Canada's copper isn't just metal, it's a brand. British Columbia and Quebec's hydroelectric grids power refining with a fraction of the emissions of coal-heavy rivals, like China or Chile. Teck Resources' $1 billion Trail smelter upgrade isn't just about capacity, it's a bet on low-carbon, ESG-compliant production. Water recycling, emissions cuts, and sustainable waste systems make Canadian copper a magnet for companies chasing net-zero mandates. The US and EU's green tech, EVs, wind farms, chips, demands materials that align with their values. Canada delivers, with supply chains transparent enough to trace from mine to market. Contrast that with Chile, where droughts and labor strikes choke output, or China, where opaque practices raise red flags. Canada's G7 and NATO status isn't just diplomatic flexing, it's a trust signal. As the US decouples from Beijing's mineral grip, Canada's reliability is gold. The International Energy Agency projects global copper demand doubling by 2050, with North America leading the charge. Canada's mines, from Highland Valley to Sudbury, and its modern refineries are built to meet that surge, offering the US a secure alternative without the geopolitical baggage. Canada's copper strategy isn't about flooding markets with ore, it's about owning the value chain. Raw exports, once the norm, are out. Refined products, 99.9% pure cathodes, wires for EVs, rods for grids, are in. This shift, accelerated since 2018, shields Canada from price swings on the London Metal Exchange and boosts revenue per ton. In 2023, exports hit $3.4 billion. By 2024, $4 billion, with refined goods driving the jump. Companies like Hudbay and Glencore are investing in metallurgy, not just mining, positioning Canada as a hub for high-tech materials. This pivot isn't just economic, it's strategic. By focusing on refined products, Canada reduces reliance on volatile commodities and strengthens its hand in trade talks. The EU, Japan, and South Korea aren't just buying copper, they're buying Canada's vision: clean, democratic, future-proof. If the US doubles down on tariffs, Canada won't blink. It's building a global network, leveraging CETA and Asia-Pacific trade ties to outmaneuver protectionist headwinds. The USMCA remains critical, but Canada's no longer tethered to one market. The tariff is a gut punch, but Canada's not down. It's using this crisis to redefine itself, not as America's resource backyard, but as a global leader in clean minerals. Investments in sustainable tech like Teck's Trail smelter signal ambition. Hydro-powered refining, rigorous ESG standards, and geopolitical trust give Canada an edge in a world scrambling for stable supplies. The US may push Buy American, but its green goals, EVs, renewables, chips, lean on Canadian copper. Protectionism could backfire, hiking costs and slowing America's energy transition. Canada's play is clear: diversify, innovate, dominate. By 2030, as copper demand soars past 1 million tons annually, Canada's refineries will power global electrification. The EU, Asia, and Latin America aren't just fallback markets, they're the future. Ottawa's building resilience not out of spite but necessity. The US tariff may sting, but it's forging a new Canada, the world's trusted source of clean, high-value copper. If this dive into the copper war sparked your interest, subscribe to War and Global Trade. We don't just follow markets, we uncover the power plays shaping the future. Stay sharp.